Before my crush's job interview, I hung up the call from her ex-boyfriend who had caused her 4 miscarriages. Later, she passed the interview successfully, but was rejected by her ex-boyfriend when she wanted to get back together. When she found out that I rejected the call, she pushed me into the river in anger, blaming me for ruining her love life. When I woke up, I found myself back on the day of her interview. This time, I answered the call without hesitation and handed the phone to her as she was about to enter. Ignoring the interviewer's prompts, she ran to her ex-boyfriend outside. Despite the whispers around me, I saw Becky disappear into the pouring rain and felt a sense of reality. I truly felt reborn. As I contemplated the situation, a man approached me and asked if Becky was a childhood friend, worried about her sudden departure, ignoring others' affairs. I recalled the lessons I learned in my past life at the cost of my own life. Ultimately, Becky's departure was seen as giving up on the interview. Even though she ranked first in the written test, she lost the chance for that career position. In my past life, during the critical moment of the career exam interview, Becky's deceitful ex-boyfriend called her. Out of concern for Becky's future, I hung up the phone to allow her to focus on the interview. Little did I know that once she succeeded, her first thought was to reconcile with her ex-boyfriend whom she found had blocked her. She received only one message on her phone. "Becky, if you won't answer my calls, we're done." Thinking that I ruined her chance with her true love by hanging up, she angrily met me by the river and pushed me in, shouting about how I destroyed her love life. The rushing water carried me away, and eventually, I couldn't hold on and sank below the surface. Suffocating and surrounded by darkness, my life ended so miserably. But to my surprise, when I opened my eyes, I found myself reborn. I was back at the moment when Becky's ex-boyfriend called her. Watching the vibrating phone and Becky preparing to enter, I didn't hesitate this time. I answered the call and stopped her from going in. After an emotional call, Becky hesitated but eventually made up her mind and abandoned the interview, rushing out with an umbrella. It seemed like she forgot about my presence entirely. I stood by, watching without any intervention. In this life, I decided to let go of helping others and respect their fate. Returning home, news spread that Becky intended to marry her deceitful ex-boyfriend. However, Becky didn't return, only calling her mom to announce she was giving up the interview to marry the deceiver. Becky's mother fainted upon hearing this. Overwhelmed with emotions, my mom comforted me, advising me to let go as Becky and I were perhaps never meant to be. Becky and I grew up together since childhood. She used to follow me like a shadow, calling me Brother David in her sweet voice. People in the village often teased us, suggesting Becky would grow up to marry me. As we grew older and entered high school, I realized my feelings for this companion I grew up with. Throughout high school, I suppressed my burgeoning love and stayed by Becky's side. After getting into the university of our dreams, the once radiant Becky caught someone else's eye before I could confess my feelings. Becky fell for Ken, a troublemaker from the neighboring vocational school. Ken rescued her from a stalker one night and soon won her heart with his rebellious charm. Becky, usually obedient, couldn't resist Ken's pursuit and soon got involved in a reckless lifestyle. Despite my attempts to advise her, Becky dismissed me with impatience, saying she wanted to relax after the hard work of getting into college. As Becky changed, buried under her newly acquired habits, I could barely recognize the girl I once knew. Years passed, and I managed to advance academically as planned. On the other hand, Becky faced challenges due to failing classes and nearly not graduating due to excessive absences. It was a struggle, but I helped her beg for leniency and make up for lost credits to secure her diploma. When Ken cheated on her and left, Becky, after a period of mourning, focused on her career and aimed to become a civil servant. Before my crush was about to interview for a government job, I hung up on her scammer ex who had caused her to miscarry 4 times. Later, she landed the job, tried to reconcile with her ex, and found she was blocked. When she found out I had hung up that call, she pushed me into the river, drowning me. "You ruined my love. I want you in hell." I opened my eyes again, and I'm back on the day of her interview. This time, without hesitation, I answer the call and hand the phone to her as she prepares to go in. Then, I watch as she ignores the entrance prompt and runs out to her ex. The reminder for going into the exam rings, but Becky, eyes filled with tears, grabs the umbrella from my hand and dashes into the rain, ignoring the protesting teacher. Oh my God, she's leaving and the interview is about to start. Becky, she was the top scorer on the written test. Is she really going to give up the interview? This job is so hard to get. Hearing the whispers around me and watching Becky disappear into the rain, it finally feels real. I've really been reborn. Hey man, aren't you childhood friends with Becky? Does she have some urgent matter? This job's hard to get into, and she's just leaving. You didn't even try to stop her? I just wave off the guy who's talking to me and say, I'm not really close. Don't want to meddle in others' business. Not interfering with others' destinies is a lesson I traded my life for in my last one. In the end, Becky's departure was seen as forfeiting the interview. Even being top of the written exam didn't get her the position. In my last life, it was the same. At the crucial point of the job interview, Becky's scammer ex called her. Thinking of her future, I hung up the call, wanting her to focus on the interview. I didn't expect her to want to reconcile with him immediately after getting the job. When she called him, she found out she had been blocked. The only message left was, Becky, since you didn't take my call, let's never meet again. Becky hated me for ending the call, blaming me for ruining her chance at true love. She asked me to meet by the river and yelled at me, face twisted, David, you're horrible. Caught off guard, she pushed me into the river. You destroyed my love. I want you in hell. I was swept away by the rushing river, rising and falling with the waters, until I finally couldn't hold on anymore and was pulled under. The feeling of suffocation, water in my throat, and endless darkness overwhelmed me. My life ended in such a pathetic way. I didn't expect to open my eyes and find out I had been reborn. I returned to the critical moment of her ex's call. Watching the vibrating phone and Becky about to go in, I answered the call without hesitation and stopped her. Whatever was said on the other end made her very emotional, conflicted. But in the end, she made up her mind, gave up on the interview, and ran out with an umbrella. It seems she forgot I was even there. I just watched coldly, without any interference. This time around, I'm going to let go of my need to help, respecting others' fates. When I got home, the news of Becky's plan to marry her scammer ex had spread all over the village. Becky herself hadn't returned, instead calling her mom to say she was giving up the interview to marry the scammer. Once her mom knew, she fainted from crying. When my mom heard, she sighed, Becky's all grown up and getting married just like that. Son, you need to let it go. This means you and Becky aren't meant to be. Seeing how worried I looked, my mom thought I couldn't get over Becky and gently advised me. Becky and I grew up together. She used to love trailing after me, calling me Little David in her cute, babbish voice. Villagers often teased, these two are so close. Becky will be David's wife when she grows up. As we got older and entered high school, seeing Becky turn into such a graceful young woman, those jokes would make me blush. I started realizing I liked this girl who'd grown up with me. For 3 years in high school, I kept my feelings hidden, staying by Becky's side. I'd bring her meals, remind her to dress warmly, and help her with schoolwork. Later, we both got into our dream university. The lively, bright girl really lit up my teenage years. But before I could confess in college, Becky's heart was already taken. Becky fell for Ken, a bad boy from the neighboring vocational school. One night, Becky was followed when returning to school, and Ken happened to save her, smoking at the corner. He courted her fervently. A well-behaved girl like Becky couldn't resist Ken's rebellious charm and quickly fell for him. To hang out with Ken, she ditched classes, learned to drink and party, and even failed some courses. I tried advising her once, but having just come back from a night out with Ken, tired and uninterested, she snapped, David, why are you so preachy all the time? I worked hard to get into college. Can I relax a bit? Her face, shrouded with smoky makeup and dense eyeliner, hid the purity of youth. I couldn't see the girl she used to be anymore. I recall her freshman year telling me excitedly, David, let's both strive for grad school. We'll be classmates again, but that girl was long gone. I realized I might lose Becky for good. I went on to grad school as planned after graduation. However, Becky had too many failed courses and absences, nearly failing to graduate. I pulled all stops, pleading on her behalf, tutoring her, just barely making sure she graduated. Ken eventually cheated on and dumped her. After grieving for a while, Becky finally decided to focus on her career and aim for a government job. She's always been smart and hardworking. If she put her mind to it, getting a permanent job in a government position wouldn't be an issue. Just like when she was a kid, she came to me, blushing, asking for help with her exam preparations. Seeing her willing to leave Ken and get back on her feet made me really happy. I helped her with all I had, gathering study materials for her. In the end, she aced the written exam coming first and made it to the interview. The night before the interview, she was both nervous and excited and said she hoped I'd be there for her on the day of the interview. David, with you there, I won't be as nervous. I looked at her face, a face that was becoming clearer in my memory from when we were young, and said with a smile, sure, that day, in a past life, it was pouring. To save time, I drove her to the interview, but it didn't matter. Everything I did couldn't compete with a single phone call from Ken. Even my life meant less to her than a strand of Ken's hair. And now, she's giving up the results of 6 hard months of exam prep, tossing aside the advantage of being top of the written exam. All for love. As I watched her silhouette fade into the rainy distance, I took a deep breath. Maybe it's for the best. From now on, we'll go our separate ways. I went home, trying to keep my face expressionless. I wasn't expecting Becky's mom to come knocking, though. I was changing a light bulb when I heard her loud voice at the door. David, get out here. You have to explain yourself today. I frowned, stepped outside, and saw my mom holding freshly washed clothes, looking surprised at Becky's mom. Andy, what's going on? Becky's mom suddenly shoved my mom, making her stumble. The laundry basket clattered to the floor, scattering clothes everywhere. I rushed over to help my mom up and started picking up the clothes. My voice cold. Auntie, what are you doing? Hands on her hips. Becky's mom glared at me. I need to know if you talked Becky into giving up her interview. She's run off with that scumbag again. Why didn't you stop her? Are you out to ruin her life? I trusted you with Becky, and you're destroying my family. She screamed, blaming me for Becky's decision to skip the interview.
My mom.
Her eyes wide in shock. Protested. That's ridiculous.
David isn't like that.
I stepped in front of my mom and calmly explained to Becky's mom, you got it wrong. It was a call from Ken that did it. It's Becky's phone. How could I have stopped her from answering? Seeing her being unreasonable, I couldn't help but smirk and start spinning nonsense. As for why Becky quit the interview, it's all because of you. Her eyes went wide with disbelief. What are you talking about? How could it be my fault? I continued. You didn't approve of Ken calling him a nobody and a thug. Becky thought if she got that job, you'd never let her be with him, so she chose not to go through with it. Becky's mom was shocked into silence by my absurd explanation. Her yelling had drawn a small crowd of curious neighbors at the door and on the street. Don't meddle in the kids' lives, right? Even if Becky messed up, it's not on David. Why are you making a scene here? Embarrassed by their comments, Becky's mom shot me a last angry look and left, muttering, wait till that girl gets back. I'll break her legs. Eventually, the issue blew over. Then 3 months later, Becky came back. Along with her was Ken. Ken, I have to admit, had the kind of good looks that some people find irresistible. The kind of charm that makes good girls in TV dramas blush over the bad boys. Becky clung to Ken happily, but a little nervously when we ran into each other at the village entrance. Her eyes lit up when she saw me. David, this is Ken. Ken smirked at me, looking every bit the proud victor as he said, you must be the big brother Becky grew up with. She's mentioned you. Sorry to say, Becky and I are getting married. He said sorry like a challenge, enjoying his moment. Hearing this, I was a bit shocked. They were rushing into marriage. How were they paying for a wedding without stable jobs? Then Becky shyly touched her stomach. I'm pregnant. 5 weeks. We want to get married soon. A strange feeling washed over me. Becky pregnant again. Before this, she'd had 4 abortions because of Ken. each time with me by her side at the hospital. The last time, the doctor scolded me, thinking I was Becky's boyfriend. You kids are out of control. If it happens again, she may never be able to have kids. Now she was expecting Ken's baby again. I turned my gaze to her belly, overwhelmed with pity. If this baby made it, it might just face a tough life. A love-struck mom, a debt-ridden dad, a grandma obsessed with money, and a family due to fall apart. Ken owed money and was blacklisted by banks for default. Trying to smile, I could manage only a flat congratulations as I passed them. I'd likely never know how she'd explain this to her mom. Coming back from my grandma's house at the East End, I saw a busy scene at Becky's home. The yard was full of guests and festivities. Becky's mom was bustling about, excitedly saying, "Oh, I knew my son-in-law had potential. He's driving a BMW now. Becky from my family has been outstanding since she was little, and the two of you really make a perfect match." I finally noticed a BMW parked in front of her house. Ken smirked and said dispassionately, "Mom, just go ahead and spend that $20,000 bridal gift. Becky won't suffer with me." Hearing that, Becky's mom's face lit up with smiles, repeatedly saying how good that sounded. I had told Becky long ago not to bother with a career path, just marry Ken. It was that boy next door who talked her into it. "Oh, it's better this way. Seeing you two getting married puts my mind at ease."
Ha ha ha.
Looking at Becky's mom and her money-hungry attitude, I wasn't at all surprised. I was just puzzled about how Ken suddenly got so rich driving a BMW and could give Becky's mom 20 grand all at once. Seeing me passing by the door, Becky's mom called out, "Hey, isn't that David? Come in and join us for dinner." She smiled smugly. I smiled lightly and said, "No thanks, Auntie. My mom's waiting for me at home." Becky's mom pretended to be disappointed. "All right, too bad you'll miss this meal. My son-in-law spent a fortune on this gourmet dinner. To be honest, what's the point of studying for a graduate degree? My daughter didn't need one to find a wealthy husband." The next day, news that Becky was marrying Ken spread all over the village. Becky's mom would tell everyone her daughter married rich with a $20K bridal gift. Arriving in a BMW. I had lots of questions, but didn't bother to dig deeper. After all, none of this concerns me anymore. Once the holiday ended, I headed to City A for work. On the day I left, Becky wanted to see me off, but Ken stopped her. "Why send him off? Come on, I'll drive you around the village in the BMW." What happened after that, I'm not sure. I just heard from my mom that Becky followed Ken to the city, probably living the good life. After finishing my graduate studies, I passed the exam to work at a top hospital in City A. My dad died of cardiovascular disease, so becoming a doctor has always been my dream. Back in high school, I wrote a wish on my goal card to become a life-saving doctor, and now it's come true. I remembered when Becky looked at me with bright eyes during our late-night study sessions and asked, "David, what's your goal? Want to swap cards and share?" On Becky's card, she had neatly written that she wanted to become a judge, upholding justice. Now we're all grown up. The girl who used to write me little notes in study hall is long gone. One day, as I went to the OB/GYN department to give my college buddy John his car keys, I saw a familiar figure in front of the clinic. Becky was holding Ken's arm while Ken frowned and smoked in the hallway. Surrounded by pregnant women, everyone gave him dirty looks. A young nurse coldly told Ken, "Sir, please go to the smoking area. No smoking here." Ken gave the nurse a dismissive look and replied arrogantly, "Mind your business. I'll smoke wherever I want." The nurse turned red with anger. "There are pregnant women here, sir. Please respect the hospital rules." Becky defended Ken, her voice bossy. "I'm a pregnant woman too. If I can handle it, why can't they?" The nurse was shocked into silence. Eventually, the husband of another pregnant woman stood up to stop Ken. Standing at 6'3", he scared Ken enough that he didn't dare say a word and slunk off into the hallway. Becky followed quickly behind. "I told you to come to the appointment yourself, but you wouldn't listen. What's my coming gonna do?" Ken snapped harshly. Becky showed an expression of grievance, but touched her belly and held back, following Ken and clinging to his arm. "What are you staring at?" John asked, tapping my shoulder to get my attention back. I turned away and smiled. Nothing. John knew Becky, and I knew each other. He glanced at her and sighed. Your little crush has some troubles. Her uterine lining's thinner than paper. Having this baby might be tough. Wonder why she settled for that jerk. In the examination room, she was scared of the checkup, but still had to comfort that guy's attitude. I stuffed the keys back in his pocket and calmly said, everyone has their path. Maybe she's content with it. I thought Becky and I wouldn't cross paths again, but to my surprise, I ran into her again at lunch when I went downstairs to buy coffee. Ken was strutting ahead with hands in his pockets, while Becky followed behind, organizing medical documents, her hair a bit disheveled. She looked embarrassed when she saw me. David, you work here? I nodded slightly, glancing at her medical papers. Everything okay? Talking about the baby? Becky smiled sweetly. The baby's very healthy. Ken snorted with disdain. So, you're a doctor. How suddenly? Becky seemed dissatisfied. David, your hospital's nurses are really awful, telling my husband what to do.
Confused.
I looked at her as she continued. She dared to stop my husband from smoking. It's not her house. Why is she so nosy? I think she's into him 'cause he's handsome. I inwardly chuckled. You do know it's a public place, right? And an OB/GYN ward at that. Can't you guys read the rules? Ken realized I was indirectly referring to him and arrogantly spat out. Who are you calling uneducated? Hayuri, just a doctor.
Who cares?
I ignored Ken and turned back to Becky. You still thinking about that civil service exam? You've got a good foundation. Becky hesitated, her eyes flickering. Putting it off for now. Studying too hard isn't good for the baby, and my husband doesn't want me to stress. She awkwardly tugged Ken's sleeve and said, let's go, David. Watching their figures disappear into the distance, I took a sip of my cold, bitter coffee. It's no surprise. Everyone's got their own path in life. Maybe we used to chase dreams for the future together. But Becky met Ken and stopped in her tracks. Even though Ken wasn't someone worth trusting, it was her decision to make. I glanced at an invite for an academic conference abroad on my phone and couldn't help but smile. Good for me, I'm not her. I won't pause my steps, and I won't forget the dreams I once had. It was a year later when I returned home. In that time, I had studied abroad and learned a lot. My cousin's wedding brought me back to attend. Before the wedding, I went to a get-together. A bunch of childhood buddies were there, people I grew up with. As adults, we all went our separate ways, starting families and careers, and it was quite an event to gather once again. David studied abroad for a year and has become way more serious. Out of all of us, only David stuck to his original goals, pursuing medical research, unlike me who had to take the grad school exam twice to make it. I didn't say much, just listened quietly as everyone joked and shared the struggles of the past years. Hey, what about Becky from next door? Haven't seen her in ages. Her story of scoring the highest on the government job test, but skipping the interview still gets talked about at work. The person who mentioned her had taken the same test the same year and got the job because Becky didn't. Giving up for a guy, that's like a god falling in a battle of the gods. David, you were closest to Becky. Got any updates on her? My hand trembled a bit as I poured tea, and I laughed. Haven't been in touch for a year, not really sure. My cousin, who walked in with snacks, overheard and leaned in. Are you talking about Becky? Oh, right. You wouldn't know since you haven't been around. She got conned and dumped by that guy. Even had to end an 8-month pregnancy. My grip tightened around the teacup, and everyone was shocked. Wasn't she married to a really rich guy? I heard there was a $20,000 dowry involved. Cousin waved her hand, expression tangled. Nah, that $20,000 was all borrowed. He was a con artist. When he couldn't borrow more, he tricked Becky into using her ID to borrow. Now she's left with debts she can't pay and is marked as unreliable. Can't even try for the government job now. I didn't expect that the money Ken used to impress Becky's mom was all borrowed. Only from my cousin did I learn that Ken kept delaying a registry with Becky, tricking her to wait until after the baby was born. Unexpectedly, within 3 months, he cheated again, deceiving another naive college girl. After finding out, Becky was heartbroken, but ready to leave Ken and start fresh. But Ken dropped a bomb on her. He'd already borrowed over $500,000 using Becky's ID on various loan platforms. That $500,000 was spent on gambling, mistresses, luxury cars, anything but Becky. Her family couldn't repay it, leaving her financially blacklisted. David, Becky's mom, even came to your house causing a scene. I frowned, realizing Mom never mentioned that. I know your mom didn't tell you, but Becky's mom wanted you to lend Becky money to pay off the debts because Becky couldn't reach you. She couldn't reach me for a reason. After parting ways at the hospital, I blocked all her contacts, thinking our paths wouldn't cross again. Everyone sighed at the thought of how Becky, once so radiant, was now tarnished and likely trapped in hardship for life. The next morning, when I went to get breakfast, I saw Becky. The sight of Becky left me speechless. She looked as if she'd aged 10 years, her once black hair now dry and brittle, her face exhausted, dark shadows under her eyes, her figure unrecognizably heavier, helping at her mom's breakfast shop. When she saw me, she froze with a flicker of light in her eyes. Seeing me, Becky's mom brightened up, like she'd seen someone to dump their problems on. Oh, David's back. Wow, David's doing well these days. Becky's been talking about you here. Take some time to catch up. Becky's mom nudged her, signaling her to chat with me. A year later, we sat down calmly. I found out Becky wanted to take another shot at a government job while pregnant, but Ken stopped her. She secretly signed up and studied for a month and a half to take the test, but on the way there, Ken called saying he'd been in a car accident with friends, urgently needing her at the hospital. So Becky turned back midway, missing another chance. Crying, Becky grabbed my hand. David, I'm really at my wit's end. I'm an unreliable debtor with huge debts. In silence, I pulled my hand back and handed her a cup of hot water. You're an adult. You chose your path. She had her chances, but picked the wrong one. I didn't expect Becky to wipe her tears and say suddenly, David, you've always liked me. Haven't you? I felt my temper flare, and instinct told me this wasn't going well. Sure enough, Becky said, David, will you marry me? I've let go of Ken, and I know you've always liked me. Otherwise, you wouldn't have urged me to leave Ken. I saw the calculation in her eyes and realized everything had changed. There was no going back. I frowned, responding coldly, You misunderstood. I told you to leave Ken because he was no good. Becky was flustered. Didn't you always like me? Why won't you admit it? Putting down my cup nonchalantly, whatever feelings I had as a kid faded with time. Becky, we're adults now. We need to face the consequences of our actions. I was holding my jacket, ready to leave, but Becky grabbed my sleeve again. Through gritted teeth, she said, Can you do me one last favor? You're at the hospital, right? Could you get me a marriage checkup report? I looked at her confused. Becky looked a bit ashamed, but came clean. She's had 5 abortions and can't have kids anymore. Abortion history shows up on marriage reports. She can hide her debts, but can't fake the report. Last time, she went on a date and they'd even discussed dowry. Her date saw the report and bolted. I looked at Becky, thinking she's a total mess. I don't have that kind of power. You can't cheat on this one. Seeing my refusal to help, Becky stood up and yelled, You're not responsible for what I've become. When Ken called me, if you'd stopped me, I wouldn't have ended up like this. Why didn't you stop me back then? I stopped in my tracks and looked at Becky's angry face, asking, If I had stopped you and you lost Ken forever, would you hate me? Becky replied, Of course not. If you'd stopped me, I wouldn't be like this. At least I wouldn't be like this now. David, you made mistakes too. You should take responsibility for my life. Listening to her, I almost laughed. In my last life, before dying, Becky's venomous curse still echoed in my ears. You damn simp. You ruined my love. Go to hell. She pushed me into the river without hesitation, laughing from the shore. The moment she knew I missed her call, she couldn't stop hating me. She caused chaos at my house and trashed it. She made a scene at the hospital saying I didn't deserve to be a doctor. And now she claims she wouldn't hate me and wants me to be responsible for her life. It's ridiculous. She's always seen me as a backup plan and knew I liked her. That's why she felt entitled to use my feelings. But now her supposed backup plan is gone too. I got into my car and drove away slowly, not looking back. In the corner of my eye, I saw Becky's mom rush out and slap her arm, shouting, "Useless.
Didn't you say David always liked you?
Who else would marry you or pay your debt?" I left without looking back, with Becky sobbing in the background. On my cousin's wedding day, I didn't expect Becky to show up. She'd fixed herself up, makeup and all, looking somewhat like her confident old self, but the light in her eyes was gone. My cousin met her husband during a trip. After getting cheated on in college, she swore off men to focus on studying bachelor's, master's, PhD. Now she's successful and happily married. In looks and talent, my cousin wasn't as good as Becky. Her college degree wasn't as good either. But on and off stage, two different lives showed Becky played her cards all wrong. After the wedding, I was leaving again. Working now, home for me is only summer and winter with no spring or fall. The day I left, Becky was waiting at my door. Hesitant, she said, "David, do you have any lawyer friends in City A? Could you recommend me a job?" Seeing her fake innocence but underlying cunning, I knew she wasn't just looking for a job in City A. I couldn't throw this unstable bomb to my friend. I rejected her. Becky didn't give up. "David, my mom's setting me up with an old guy in town." Becky got close, eyes full of pity. "David, if you don't take me away, you'll never get another chance." She tried to hug me, but I pushed her away, frowning. Who she dated or married wasn't my concern. I drove away without looking back, leaving her alone in the wind. Later, I settled in Cedia, starting a new life. After work, I went to the gym and learned ceramics. It spiced up my life. Through colleagues, I met a wonderful woman. She was the opposite of Becky, vibrant and outspoken. We liked each other. While we were still getting to know each other, news of Becky reached me first. She's getting married again. My mom told me Becky's mom set her up with a guy over 10 years older. He was divorced with kids and didn't care about her abortions, just wanted someone young and pretty to take care of his kids. He even gave a $30,000 dowry, making Becky's mom grin ear to ear. Becky changed her number and texted me, saying she was miserable marrying someone she didn't love. She asked if I still wanted to save her, giving me one last chance. Speechless, I realized she still acted like a haughty benefactor. I unblocked her and, predictably, got her friend request immediately. She sent me a wedding invite. "David, I wish my first wedding dress was for you. Remember the wedding dress shop we passed by in high school?" I didn't give her the chance to play emotional games. I quickly transferred money as a gift. "Congrats on the wedding. Wishing you a lifetime of happiness." Then, Becky invited me to a video call, which I immediately declined. She bombarded me with dozens of 60-second voice messages, but I didn't listen. I blocked her again. I didn't want to attend Becky's wedding, but on that day, I returned to my hometown. I wanted to see Becky's end, having fulfilled her wishes. The wedding venue was very basic. The old man's kids were still goofing around, spilling tea everywhere. Originally, the old man didn't intend to treat Becky well. He just thought he spent $20,000 on a young and beautiful maid. So when she saw me show up, Becky was thrilled. She didn't even want to exchange rings with the old man at the wedding. She reluctantly went through the motions after he gave her a threatening look. When toasting, Becky found a moment when the old man wasn't around and quietly came up to me, eyes full of expectation. "David, did you come to take me away?" I gave her a slight smile, showing the ring on my finger. "I'm already engaged." "Becky, congratulations on your marriage. Growing up watching you, I'm truly happy for you." With each word I said, Becky's face got paler. She stared at my ring with resentment. "How could you be with someone else? Didn't you always like me?" Tears welled up in her eyes as she trembled, saying, "David, I know you just found someone who looks like me. You still have a chance to take me away." I took a step back, gave a cold response. "I only see you as a sister. Please respect yourself. I've given my blessing, so I'll head out." Becky tried to reach for me again, but was suddenly pulled away with force. The old man had come over, glaring at her viciously. Such immorality, getting married, and still messing with another man here. I paid $20,000 for you. You'd better behave. The old man's son wet himself again and started crying. So Becky suppressed her temper and went to comfort him. For the high school's 70th anniversary, they invited a ton of successful alumni to tour the campus. I was on the invite list too. Back at school, I saw many old classmates again. Over the years, they've become leaders in their fields. I heard Becky was invited too, but the old man kept her home with the kids, not allowing her to join the gatherings. This drew some sighs from our classmates. How did Becky end up like this? Back then, we all thought David and Becky were a thing. Yeah, the class beauty even wrote David a love letter. But I saw Becky stop it and claim her territory. I was stunned. Someone actually sent me a love letter? How come I don't remember? Seeing my bewildered look, someone continued. David, you didn't know? I saw it coming back from gym class. The class beauty was by our back door trying to place a love letter on your desk. But Becky turned her down, saying you two would be together. I laughed, accepting it. Becky knew everything. She knew I liked her, so she'd always give off flirtatious signals, yet pretend to be innocent about relationships to mess with me. She comfortably enjoyed my help and special treatment while not resisting other temptations after college, like that handsome guy Ken. How ridiculous. Fortunately, the past is like smoke, unable to stir my heart now. While discussing engagement with my girlfriend, we visited my hometown. My mom was overjoyed. During lunch, we heard the clattering and cursing of Becky's mom next door, mixed with the sound of dishes breaking. After my girlfriend left, my mom chatted with me, saying that in recent years, Becky's family had become a mess. Becky really got herself into trouble. I heard she's in debt for millions. I heard Becky reconnected with that scamming ex-boyfriend, left the kids locked up at home to meet him, and her son got burned by a kettle. Her husband almost beat her to death when he came home. My mom shook her head as she spoke. She had watched Becky grow up and felt a bit bad about her situation. I later heard that the old man found out about Becky still seeing Ken and wanted a divorce, demanding the $20,000 back. Unexpectedly, Becky demanded to split over $200,000 in divorce assets. The old man discovered Becky was millions in debt and was nearly knocked out from the shock. He went to Becky's parents' house, smashed everything he could find, and slapped her mom.
You all teamed up to scam me. This was a scam marriage.
I'm telling you, I won't give a penny. You'd better give me back my $20,000. At first, I was just entertained by the drama, but I never expected it to concern me. Becky started spouting nonsense to the old man, claiming that Ken's loan in her name was actually taken by me. I hadn't even left for home when the old man dragged Becky to my house, demanding back the $20,000 bride price. Give me back the bride price. Take this homewrecker and scam bride back. Looking at Becky's guilty face, I coldly laughed. Did you really say that to him? Brother, we've known each other for so many years. Are you really going to watch me be pushed to death? Fine. Before she could finish her tea-flavored words, I nodded decisively. I'll go get the money. Wait here. Then I directly brought the police back. Seeing the police, Becky instantly turned pale. The truth will come out. Leave it to the police to investigate. First, I never had any financial or emotional ties with her. Regarding your defamation and the extortion of $20,000, I reserve the right to pursue it further. Upon seeing my reaction, the old man finally understood, hastily apologizing to the police, then viciously turning to Becky. Wench, if you dare scam me, I'll kill you. 3 days after the investigation started, Becky had vanished when the old man stormed home. Neighbors said Becky left the night before with a tall man after packing her bags. CCTV footage revealed it was Ken. The old man cursed his luck, thinking his $20,000 was wasted and, under police orders, came to apologize to me. I thought that would be the end, and Becky would no longer appear in my world. But then 6 months later, a murder case made headlines. A man forced a woman into prostitution to repay his huge debts. The woman, unwilling, was beaten. Nearly killed, She tried to call the police, but the man stabbed her 3 times. Becky was rushed to the hospital, luckily surviving, but suffered nerve damage and became paralyzed. Even knowing Ken was a terrible trap, she dove in, ending up like this. She deserved it. The case gained significant attention. Ken was caught and, along with past crimes, was sentenced to life imprisonment. When I visited Becky in the hospital, she was skin and bones, overly excited to see me. Hoarsely, she accused, "Are you here to mock me? It's all your fault. Why didn't you stop me from that interview? And when I begged you back then, why didn't you marry me?" For her mistakes, for her ruined life, she wanted me to take the blame. Even now, she was delusional, blaming others. I nodded. I was indeed there to see her fall. Having suffered a loss myself, my family grieving deeply, how could I forgive easily? Seeing her downfall finally cleared the chip on my shoulder. Even if I had helped you back then, you wouldn't have appreciated it. Admit it, Becky, you're selfish. You got what you deserved for your own deeds. Leaving the hospital, the rain drizzled down. My new wife stood not far, holding an umbrella, waiting for me. I grinned and walked toward her. The future lies ahead for me.